Human expected coldness from the alien commander, but when he was alone with her, Lieutenant Commander Jeremy Mason had expected many things when he boarded the Galactic Alliance vessel Indefatigable. Cold stares, hostile remarks, perhaps even outright discrimination. After all, humans were still newcomers to the interstellar community, viewed with suspicion by many of the older species who dominated the Alliance. What he hadn't expected was Commander Nyx. Jeremy stood at rigid attention in the ship's reception bay, his dark green Terran Space Force uniform immaculate, the silver insignia catching the light. His thick chestnut hair was regulation short, his athletic build evident even beneath the formal attire. Around him, alien crew members moved with practiced efficiency, occasionally casting curious glances his way. "Lieutenant Commander Mason," a deep voice announced, "Commander Nyx will see you now." Jeremy nodded to the reptilian officer and followed him through the gleaming corridors of the massive vessel. The ship was unlike anything in Earth's fleet, more organic in design, with flowing lines and strange, pulsating light patterns that seemed to communicate information he couldn't begin to decipher. "First human liaison officer aboard an Orion-class vessel," the reptilian remarked without looking back. "You must have impressed someone important." "Or pissed someone off," Jeremy replied with a wry smile. The reptilian made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. "With Commander Nyx, you may wish it had been the latter." Before Jeremy could ask what he meant, they arrived at the command deck. The doors parted with a soft hiss, revealing a circular chamber dominated by holographic displays and staffed by a diverse array of alien species. And there, at the center of it all, stood Commander Nyx. Jeremy had reviewed her file and, of course, knew she was Solarian, one of the humanoid species from the Rigel system, distinguished by their vibrant skin tones and enhanced sensory capabilities. But the personnel file hadn't prepared him for the reality. Commander Nyx stood tall and proud, her smooth orange skin a striking contrast to her long silver hair, which cascaded in soft waves down to her waist despite the military setting. Her attire was Regulation Alliance, a form-fitting gray bodysuit with black accents. But on her, it seemed both authoritative and undeniably alluring, emphasizing her full chest and slender figure. Tall, glossy black boots completed the ensemble, giving her both a commanding and formidable presence. But it was her eyes that caught Jeremy off guard. Large, almond-shaped, and a startling shade of violet that seemed to pierce right through him. "Lieutenant Commander Mason," she said, her voice cool and measured. "Welcome aboard the Indefatigable." Jeremy snapped to attention. "Commander Nyx, thank you for accepting my assignment." "I wasn't given a choice," she replied flatly. "The Alliance High Command believes that having a human officer will improve relations with Earth. I'm simply following orders." Several officers nearby exchanged glances. Jeremy maintained his composure, though he felt his cheeks warm slightly. "I understand, Commander. I'll do my best not to disappoint." Her violet eyes narrowed slightly. "See that you don't. The Indefatigable is the flagship of the 7th Fleet. We maintain peace in 12 star systems and serve as the first line of defense against draconian incursions. This isn't a diplomatic cruise ship, Commander Mason." "I'm aware of the ship's reputation, Commander. I've studied your battle tactics from the Protean engagement. Brilliant work." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, before her expression hardened again. "Lieutenant Krall will show you to your quarters and brief you on your duties. You begin your shift at 0600 ship time tomorrow. Dismissed." Jeremy saluted crisply and turned to follow the reptilian officer who had escorted him earlier. As they left the command deck, he could feel the commander's eyes on his back. "Told you," Lieutenant Krall murmured as the doors closed behind them. "Is she always that warm and fuzzy?" Jeremy asked dryly. Krall made that clicking sound again. "Actually, that was relatively pleasant. The last liaison officer was reduced to tears within 5 minutes." "Wonderful! Commander Nyx is the youngest ship commander in Alliance history," Krall explained as they walked. "She earned it through merit, not connections. 3 major victories against the Draconians, saved 2 colony worlds from destruction, and pioneered tactical maneuvers that are now taught at the Academy." "I know her record," Jeremy said. "It's impressive. What you don't know is that she lost her homeworld to the Draconians when she was a child. She was one of 12 survivors from a population of millions." Jeremy felt a chill run down his spine. I didn't see that in her file. It's not there, but everyone knows. Kral stopped outside a door. These are your quarters. The computer will respond to your voice commands once you register. Mess hall is 2 decks down, training facilities are on deck 7, and the officer's lounge is on deck 3. Any questions? Jeremy shook his head. I'll figure it out. One more thing, Kral added, his reptilian features impossible to read. The commander runs a tight ship, but she's fair. Do your job well, and you'll earn her respect. He paused. Eventually. With that encouraging note, Kral left Jeremy alone with his thoughts and a small duffel containing his personal effects. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Jeremy quickly learned that the Indefatigable operated on a schedule that would make a Swiss watchmaker envious. Every crew member knew their role and executed it with precision. As liaison officer, Jeremy's primary duty was to serve as the bridge between human and Alliance protocols, ensuring smooth joint operations. Commander Nyx was exactly as advertised, demanding, exacting, and coldly professional. She rarely addressed Jeremy directly, preferring to issue orders through her first officer, a stoic Andorian named Trell. When she did speak to him, it was with the same chilly efficiency she showed everyone, or almost everyone. Jeremy couldn't help but notice that she seemed to have a warmer rapport with her senior staff, occasionally even sharing what appeared to be inside jokes with her tactical officer. Just not with him. Don't take it personally, advised Lieutenant Mia Larson, another human who had been aboard for 6 months in the science division. She's like that with all newcomers, especially humans. Why especially humans? Jeremy asked as they shared a meal in the mess hall. Mia shrugged. We're the new kids on the block. Some species think we advanced too quickly, that we haven't earned our place at the table yet. We fought alongside the Alliance in the Draconian War. For the last year of a 30-year conflict, Mia pointed out. And some say we only joined when it became clear which way the wind was blowing. Jeremy frowned. That's not fair. Earth was isolated, unaware of the larger galactic community until the Draconians attacked the Proxima colony. Fair doesn't enter into it, Mia said, pushing her food around her plate. Just give it time. You'll earn your place here, same as I did. 2 weeks into his assignment, Jeremy was beginning to wonder if that was true. He performed his duties flawlessly, even earning grudging nods of approval from Lieutenant Commander Trell. But Commander Nyx remained as distant as ever, until the night everything changed. Jeremy was in engineering, reviewing compatibility protocols for Earth's new quantum communication system, when his comm unit beeped. Lieutenant Commander Mason, came the unmistakable voice of Commander Nyx. Report to Maintenance Bay 12 immediately. Jeremy frowned. Maintenance Bay 12 was in a seldom-used section of the ship, far from the main operational areas. May I ask why, Commander? There was a pause. You may not. Report immediately. The communication cut off. Jeremy exchanged a puzzled glance with the engineering officer he'd been working with, who merely shrugged. Better not keep her waiting, the alien advised. Jeremy made his way through the ship's corridors, increasingly puzzled as he moved into areas that seemed almost deserted. Maintenance Bay 12 was located near the outer hull, in a section used primarily for storage and occasional repairs to the ship's external sensors. When he arrived, the bay was dimly lit, illuminated only by the soft glow of control panels and status indicators. At first, he thought it was empty. Commander Nyx, he called out. Close the door, Lieutenant Commander. Jeremy turned to see her emerging from the shadows near a bank of monitoring equipment. In the low light, her orange skin seemed to glow with an inner luminescence, her silver hair catching what little light there was like polished metal. Is there a problem with the systems here? He asked, professional despite his confusion. Commander Nyx moved toward him with a fluid grace that seemed almost predatory. No problem with the systems, Commander Mason. She stepped closer, and Jeremy caught a scent he hadn't noticed before. Something exotic and spicy, yet pleasant. For the first time, he noticed that her uniform seemed slightly less formal than usual, the top fastening undone just enough to reveal a hint of collarbone. Then why, he began. Commander Nyx stepped even closer, invading his personal space in a way that was decidedly non-regulation. With deliberate slowness, she placed one booted foot on the metal chair beside him, leaning in slightly. A mysterious smile played across her lips, and there was a mischievous glint in her large violet eyes. "So, human man," she said, her voice soft and provocative, nothing like the clipped tones she used on the bridge. "Have you settled in yet, or do I need to personally help you get used to your new duties?" Jeremy felt his face flush, caught completely off guard by this sudden shift. His heart hammered in his chest as he struggled to make sense of what was happening. "Commander, he stammered, unsure how to respond. Her smile widened, revealing perfect white teeth that seemed to gleam in the dim light. "You seem surprised, Lieutenant Commander. Did you think I brought you to this isolated section of my ship to discuss protocol?" Jeremy's mind raced as he stood frozen before Commander Nyx. Her violet eyes held his, challenging and inviting at once. The professional distance she'd maintained for 2 weeks had evaporated, replaced by something electric that charged the air between them. "Commander," he finally managed, his voice steadier than he expected. "This is unexpected." A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Is it? I've watched you, Lieutenant Commander Mason. You're different from what I anticipated." "And what did you anticipate?" he asked, finding his footing in this strange new territory. She straightened, but didn't step back. "Humans have a reputation in the Alliance. Brash, impulsive, politically naive." Her eyes traced his features with undisguised interest. "But you've shown patience, competence, adaptability." "High praise coming from you," Jeremy said, allowing himself a small smile. "Don't get used to it." There was humor in her voice now, a warmth he'd never heard before. "On the bridge, I'm still your commanding officer." "And here?" The question slipped out before he could reconsider. Commander Nyx's orange skin seemed to glow more intensely in the dim light. "Here, I'm simply Thalia." The use of her first name shifted something between them. Jeremy felt the last of his professional reserve begin to crumble. "Thalia?" He tested the name, liking how it felt. "I'm Jeremy." "I know who you are," she replied, her voice dropping to a near whisper as she leaned closer. "The question is, do you know what you want?" The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Jeremy knew the regulations about fraternization, knew the complications this could create. But in that moment, with her silver hair catching the blue light of the control panels and her exotic scent filling his senses, those concerns seemed distant and unimportant. He closed the remaining distance between them. Their first kiss was tentative, exploratory, the meeting of two species with more similarities than differences. Her lips were warmer than he expected, her skin radiating heat that seemed to pull him in. When they parted, her violet eyes had darkened to a deeper shade of purple. "Your temperature rises," she observed, running a finger along his jawline. "Fascinating." "A common human response," he said, his voice rough, "to attraction." There was genuine curiosity mixed with her desire. "Among other things." Her smile turned mischievous. "I should like to study these other things." What followed was a discovery of differences and similarities. The texture of her skin beneath his fingertips, smooth like polished stone, but warm and yielding. The way her silver hair seemed almost liquid in the low light, the surprising strength in her slender frame as she pulled him closer. They moved together in the shadows of the maintenance bay, learning each other's bodies with increasing urgency. Uniforms loosened, breaths quickened, and the professional distance that had defined their relationship dissolved completely. "Your species," she murmured against his neck, "is full of contradictions. So fragile, yet so resilient." "We could say the same about Solarians," he replied, tracing the curve of her spine. She laughed softly. "Perhaps that's why we're compatible in more ways than one." Time lost meaning in that isolated corner of the ship. They explored each other with increasing intimacy, their connection deepening with each passing moment. Jeremy discovered that Solarian physiology, while similar to human in many ways, had its own unique aspects that made their encounter all the more intriguing. Afterward, they lay together on his discarded uniform jacket, her head resting on his chest. "Your heartbeat," she said, placing her palm over it. "It's different from mine." "How so?" "Faster, more urgent." She looked up at him. Like everything about humans. Jeremy smiled. We don't live as long as Solarians. Maybe that's why we're always in a hurry. A shadow passed over her features. Life is precious, regardless of its length. He sensed the weight behind her words, remembering what Kral had told him about her lost homeworld. Before he could respond, a piercing alarm shattered the moment. Attention all personnel, at battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, battle stations. This is not a drill. They were on their feet instantly, years of training overriding everything else. Uniforms were straightened, composures regained with military efficiency. Draconian vessels detected in Sector 7, the ship's AI announced. 3 warships on intercept course. Thalia's face transformed, all softness vanishing as she became Commander Nyx once more. But when she looked at Jeremy, something of their intimacy remained in her eyes. Lieutenant Commander Mason, she said, her voice crisp and professional. Report to the bridge immediately. Yes, Commander? As they moved toward the door, she caught his arm. For a brief moment, the commander's mask slipped. Jeremy, she said softly, what happened here stays here, he finished for her. Until we decide otherwise. She nodded, relief visible in her expression. Then her features hardened again as another alarm sounded. The Draconians, she said, her voice cold with hatred, always hunting at the edges of Alliance space. Jeremy saw something in her eyes then, a pain so deep it made his chest ache. We'll stop them, he said with conviction. Yes, she agreed, her voice like steel. We will. They moved swiftly through the corridors, all evidence of their encounter erased save for the lingering glances they exchanged. By the time they reached the bridge, Commander Nyx was fully restored, the authoritative, brilliant tactician who had earned her command through merit and courage. But Jeremy knew something no one else on the bridge did. Beneath that commanding exterior beat a heart capable of tenderness, passion, and perhaps, someday, something more. As the view screen filled with the approaching Draconian warships, sleek and predatory against the backdrop of stars, Jeremy took his station. Whatever happened next, he knew that his relationship with Commander Thalia Nyx and his time aboard the Indefatigable had irrevocably changed. The bridge of the Indefatigable erupted into controlled chaos as Jeremy and Thalia arrived. Officers called out status reports while tactical displays showed the approaching Draconian warships. 3 predatory vessels with distinctive serrated hulls that resembled ancient earth sharks. Shields at maximum, Lieutenant Commander Trell reported. Weapons systems online. Communications? Thalia demanded, sliding into the command chair with fluid grace. They're not responding to hails, Commander, the communications officer replied. Jeremy took his station, quickly assessing the tactical situation. The Draconians had positioned themselves in a classic pincer formation, designed to trap the Alliance vessel between their converging forces. Standard Draconian attack pattern, he observed. They're expecting us to break formation and run. Thalia's eyes narrowed as she studied the display. Then we'll disappoint them. Her voice was cold, detached, but Jeremy detected something beneath the professional facade. A tremor of rage, tightly controlled but unmistakable. Tactical analysis, Lieutenant Commander Mason, she ordered. Jeremy quickly ran the numbers. Their formation gives them the advantage if we maintain course. However, if we execute a Corbin maneuver, we could potentially... No, Thalia cut him off. We're not running. Helm, bring us about. Full impulse, direct intercept course with the lead vessel. A stunned silence fell over the bridge. Even Trell looked shocked. Commander, the Andorian said carefully, that would place us directly in their line of fire. I'm aware, Commander Trell. Her voice was ice. Tactical, prepare a full spread of quantum torpedoes. Target their propulsion systems. Jeremy exchanged a concerned glance with Trell. This wasn't standard procedure. It was recklessly aggressive. Commander, Jeremy said quietly, permission to speak freely? Thalia's violet eyes flashed to him, and for a moment he saw the woman from the maintenance bay. Vulnerable, passionate. Then her expression hardened again. Denied, Lieutenant Commander. Execute my orders. The ship lurched as it changed course, heading directly toward the Draconian vessels. On the view screen, the lead warship grew larger, its weapons ports glowing with charged energy. "They're powering weapons," the tactical officer announced. "Hold course," Thalia commanded. Jeremy watched her knuckles whiten as she gripped the arms of her command chair. This wasn't tactical brilliance. It was personal, dangerously personal. The first volley from the draconian ships struck the Indefatigable with devastating force. The bridge shuddered, consoles exploding in showers of sparks. "Shields at 60%, someone called out. "Return fire," Thalia ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. "All weapons." The Indefatigable unleashed its arsenal, brilliant beams of energy lancing out to strike the lead draconian vessel. Direct hits, but the enemy ships kept coming. Another impact rocked the ship, more violent than the first. Jeremy was thrown from his station, landing hard on the deck as emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red. "Hull breach on deck 12, Trell shouted over the alarms. "Emergency force fields holding, but we've lost primary power to sections 29 through 35. Jeremy pulled himself back to his station, checking the damage reports. "Commander, we have crew trapped in section 32. Life support is failing in that area." Thalia's expression didn't change. "Dispatch emergency teams." "The corridors are blocked by debris," Jeremy reported. "They can't get through." For the first time, Thalia hesitated. Jeremy could see the conflict in her eyes, the mission versus her crew. "Commander," Trell said urgently, "the Draconians are regrouping for another attack run." Thalia made her decision. "Trell, you have the bridge. Continue the attack pattern." She stood, her silver hair catching the red emergency lights like flame. "Lieutenant Commander Mason, with me, will extract the trapped crew personally." As they hurried from the bridge, another impact sent them stumbling against the corridor wall. Thalia fell against Jeremy, and he caught her instinctively, their bodies pressed together for a brief electric moment. "Are you all right?" he asked, steadying her. "I'm fine," she said, but didn't immediately pull away. Their eyes met, and in that moment of crisis, something passed between them, an understanding, a connection deeper than physical attraction. "Thalia," Jeremy said quietly, "this attack pattern, it's not tactical, it's personal." Her expression hardened. "You don't understand. I know about your homeworld." She stiffened in his arms. "Who told you?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're risking this ship, your crew, for revenge." "They deserve to be destroyed," she hissed, her composure cracking. "Do you know what they did? They didn't just attack. They experimented. Biological weapons, my family, my entire species. They died screaming." Jeremy held her gaze. "And you'll honor them by dying too? By sacrificing your crew?" Something flickered in her violet eyes. Doubt, perhaps. Before she could respond, the ship rocked again, and the corridor ahead of them buckled as emergency bulkheads slammed down. "We're cut off," Jeremy realized. "The primary route to Section 32 is blocked." Thalia pulled away, professional once more. "There's an auxiliary maintenance shaft through here." She led him to a small access panel. "It'll be tight, but we can make it through." They crawled through the narrow shaft, the ship continuing to shudder around them as the battle raged. In the confined space, Jeremy was acutely aware of Thalia ahead of him. Her scent, the graceful way she moved even in crisis. "The crew trapped in Section 32, Jeremy said as they crawled. "Who are they?" "Engineering team," Thalia replied. 3 Rigelians and 1 human. Lieutenant Larson." Jeremy felt his stomach drop. Mia Larson, the science officer who had befriended him. "We'll get them out," he promised. They reached the end of the maintenance shaft and emerged into a corridor filled with smoke. Emergency lighting flickered, casting eerie shadows. "Life support is failing," Thalia noted, checking a wall panel. "We have less than 20 minutes before oxygen levels become critical." Another violent impact sent them both sprawling to the deck. As the ship groaned around them, Jeremy realized they were now trapped as well, cut off from both the bridge and the rest of the crew. Thalia met his eyes in the dim red light, and he saw something there he hadn't expected. Fear, not for herself, but for her ship, for her people. "We need to get to them," she said, "and then we need to stop the Draconians, whatever it takes." Jeremy nodded, understanding now that her vendetta wasn't just about revenge, it was about protection. about ensuring no one else suffered as she had. As they pushed forward into the smoke-filled corridor, the ship trembled around them like a wounded animal. But in that moment of crisis, something new had formed between them. A bond forged in fire, stronger than physical attraction, deeper than professional respect. They would save their crew, they would defeat the Draconians, and they would do it together. The smoke grew thicker as Jeremy and Thalia approached Section 32. Emergency lighting cast everything in a bloody glow, and the ship's groans intensified with each Draconian assault. "Life support failing," announced the ship's computer. "Oxygen levels at 60% and declining." They reached the sealed door to Section 32, where Thalia quickly overrode the security protocols. The door slid open with a reluctant hiss, revealing 4 figures huddled near a damaged console. "Commander!" Lieutenant Larson exclaimed, relief washing over her face. The human woman's uniform was torn, a nasty gash visible on her forehead. Beside her were 3 Rigelians, tall, willowy beings with iridescent skin that pulsed with bioluminescence. One lay on the floor, clearly injured, while the other 2 worked frantically at a damaged panel. "Report!" Thalia ordered, kneeling beside the injured Rigelian. "Direct hit to the power coupling," Larson explained. "We were performing routine maintenance when the attack began. The emergency bulkheads deployed before we could evacuate." The tallest Rigelian, whose name tag identified him as Engineer Prell, stepped forward. "We've been attempting to reroute life support, but the primary systems are offline." "And the backup systems?" Jeremy asked. "Failing," replied the 3rd Rigelian, his voice melodic despite the tension. "We have perhaps 15 minutes before complete atmospheric loss." Another violent impact rocked the ship, sending them all stumbling. A support beam groaned ominously above them. "We need to move," Thalia said. "The structural integrity in this section is compromised." "Vex cannot be moved," Prell stated, gesturing to the injured Rigelian. "His exoskeleton has fractured. Movement would cause catastrophic internal damage." Jeremy knelt beside the injured alien, noting the strange angle of his limbs. Rigelian physiology was dramatically different from human or Solarian. Their skeletal structure was external, similar to Earth insects but on a humanoid scale. "We can't leave him," Larson insisted. "And we won't," Jeremy assured her. He looked up at Thalia. "But we can't stay here either." Thalia's expression was grim. "The maintenance shaft we used to get here won't accommodate Vex's height, even if he could move." "Commander," Prell interjected, his bioluminescence pulsing with what Jeremy recognized as anxiety. "According to Rigelian protocol, damaged units should be abandoned to preserve the collective." Larson's head snapped up. "He's not a unit, he's a person." "Efficiency dictates," the 3rd Rigelian began. "To hell with efficiency," Larson interrupted. "We're not leaving anyone behind." Jeremy watched the cultural clash unfold with fascination, despite the dire circumstances. The Rigelians' hive-minded approach to survival versus human individualism, a fundamental difference in values playing out in real time. Thalia's violet eyes met his, and he saw understanding there. As a Solarian who had lost her entire species, she understood both perspectives intimately. "We're not abandoning anyone," she declared, silencing the debate. "But we need solutions, not arguments." Another explosion rocked the ship, and this time, the bulkhead behind them buckled. A horrifying hiss filled the air as atmosphere began to vent into space. "Breach!" Jeremy shouted. "An emergency seal failing!" Without hesitation, he lunged toward the damaged section, grabbing a piece of torn metal plating and pressing it against the widening crack. The suction was immense, threatening to pull him into the void. "I need help," he called out. Thalia was beside him instantly, her orange hands joining his on the makeshift patch. Together, they held it against the breach, but the metal was bending under the pressure. "It won't hold," she said, her silver hair whipping around her face from the escaping air. Jeremy looked around desperately, then spotted Larson's toolkit. "Plasma welder, if we can seal the edges." Larson understood immediately, scrambling for the tool. But as she approached, the ship lurched again, and the breach widened. The metal plate began to slip from their grasp. In that moment, Jeremy made a decision. He positioned himself directly against the breach, using his body to block the escaping atmosphere. "Jeremy, no!" Thalia cried, understanding his intent. "Get the welder," he shouted back. "I can hold it." The cold of space began to seep through the thin metal, burning his skin through his uniform. The pressure was crushing, threatening to pull him through the widening crack, but he held firm, muscles straining, teeth gritted against the pain. Larson worked frantically with the plasma welder, the blue flame casting eerie shadows as she sealed the edges of the metal plate to the bulkhead. The Rigelians watched in apparent astonishment at the human self-sacrifice. "Almost there," Larson muttered. Jeremy's vision began to blur as oxygen deprivation set in. The cold was unbearable now, his hands numb where they pressed against the metal. Then Thalia was there, her warm body pressed against his back, her arms around him, adding her strength to his. Her breath was hot against his ear as she whispered, "Hold on, Jeremy. Just a little longer." Their bodies molded together as they fought against the vacuum of space, an intimacy born of desperation and shared purpose. In that moment, despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, Jeremy felt a connection with her that transcended physical attraction. "Done!" Larson finally announced, the last seal complete. Jeremy sagged against the now secure plate, Thalia still holding him from behind. He turned in her arms, their faces inches apart in the dim red light. "That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid," she said, her voice a mixture of admiration and anger. "Humans excel at both," he replied with a weak smile. The moment was interrupted by Prell, who approached with what appeared to be reverence in his luminous eyes. "Your species values individual life to the point of self-sacrifice," he observed. "This is inefficient but admirable." "It's what makes us human," Larson said proudly. "And it may be what saves us all," Thalia added, her gaze still locked with Jeremy's. "Because I have an idea." She turned to address the group. "The Draconians expect us to follow Alliance protocols, to retreat to prioritize defense, but they've never faced a human-Solarian hybrid approach." "What are you suggesting?" Jeremy asked. A fierce smile spread across Thalia's face. "We're going to use human ingenuity, Solarian tactics, and Rigelian technology to not only escape this section, but to turn the tide of this battle." She gestured to the damaged console. "The Draconians have positioned themselves to cut off our main propulsion and weapon systems, but they don't know about the experimental phase shift technology the Rigelians installed last month." Prell's bioluminescence brightened with understanding. "The prototype is untested in combat conditions." "And therefore unexpected," Thalia concluded. "Lieutenant Commander Mason, your assessment?" Jeremy considered the possibilities. "If we can reconfigure the phase shift to affect not just our ship, but to project a field around the Draconian vessels, we could temporarily disrupt their shields," Larson finished excitedly. "Precisely," Thalia confirmed. "But we'll need to work together. Human intuition, Solarian precision, and Rigelian technical expertise." As they began to formulate their plan, Jeremy caught Thalia watching him with an expression that made his pulse quicken despite their dire circumstances. In the midst of crisis, surrounded by alien cultures and facing impossible odds, he realized something profound. He was falling in love with her. And judging by the look in her violet eyes, she might be falling for him too. "Rerouting power to the phase shift emitters," Prell announced, his luminous fingers dancing across the damaged console. Jeremy and Thalia worked alongside the Rigelians, reconfiguring the experimental technology that might save them all. Lieutenant Larson had fashioned a makeshift stretcher for Vex, preparing him for evacuation once they restored ship systems. "Connection established," the third Rigelian, Naran, confirmed. "Phase shift ready at your command." Thalia nodded, her silver hair gleaming in the emergency lighting. "On my mark," a massive explosion rocked the ship, more violent than any previous impact. The deck beneath them buckled, consoles exploding in cascades of sparks. Jeremy was thrown against the bulkhead, pain lancing through his shoulder. "Direct hit to the primary reactor," Larson shouted over the alarms. "Containment field destabilizing." The ship's computer voice cut through the chaos. "Warning, catastrophic reactor breach imminent. All personnel evacuate immediately. Repeat, all personnel evacuate immediately." Thalia's eyes met Jeremy's across the smoke-filled compartment. In that brief glance, 1,000 words passed between them. Regret, determination, and something deeper neither had dared name. Evacuation protocol, she ordered, her commander's voice steady despite the chaos. Emergency pods are 2 sections over. Move. Jeremy helped Larson with the injured Rigelian, while Prel and Naran gathered essential equipment. Thalia led the way, her orange skin almost glowing against the darkness as emergency systems failed around them. They navigated through buckled corridors and fallen debris, the ship dying around them. Through a viewport, Jeremy caught a glimpse of the Draconian vessels, still in attack formation. They're not backing off, he observed, even with our reactor about to blow. Thalia's expression darkened. They want something badly enough to risk their own destruction. They reached the evacuation bay, where rows of escape pods waited. Most had already launched, carrying the ship's crew to safety. Get Vex secured, Thalia ordered as they entered the bay. We launch in 60 seconds. As Larson and the Rigelians prepared their pod, Jeremy noticed Thalia accessing a computer terminal, her movements urgent. What are you doing? He asked, approaching her. Checking ship sensors, she replied, not looking up. Something's wrong. The Draconians' attack pattern changed after their initial scans. They're not just attacking, they're hunting. The screen before her displayed sensor data, highlighting unusual scan patterns from the enemy vessels. Jeremy leaned closer, his chest brushing against her back as he studied the information. They're focusing their scans on specific biosignatures, he realized, not weapons or technology. Thalia's fingers froze over the controls. They're scanning for Solarians. The implication hit Jeremy like a physical blow. They're after you. She turned to face him, their bodies inches apart in the cramped space. I thought I was the last, she whispered, her voice suddenly vulnerable. After my homeworld, there were rumors of survivors, but I never found proof. And neither did the Draconians, Jeremy concluded, until now. Another explosion rocked the ship, throwing them together. Jeremy's arms encircled her instinctively, steadying them both. For a moment, they clung to each other, the boundaries between commander and officer dissolving in the face of this revelation. Commander! Larson called from the escape pod. We're ready. Thalia pulled back, her professional mask slipping back into place, though her eyes remained troubled. Let's go. They boarded the escape pod, securing themselves as the ship continued to break apart around them. Prel initiated the launch sequence, his bioluminescence pulsing with anxiety. Launch in 10 seconds, the Rigelian announced. Jeremy felt Thalia's hand find his in the dim confines of the pod. He squeezed gently, offering silent support. The pod ejected with a violent jolt, spinning away from the dying Indefatigable. Through the viewport, they watched as their ship, once proud and powerful, began to break apart, secondary explosions blooming along its hull. Stabilizing thrusters, Nareen reported, bringing the pod under control. But their relief was short-lived. The sensor panel beeped an urgent warning. Draconian interceptor on approach, Larson announced, her voice tight. They're targeting us specifically. How? Prel demanded. There are dozens of escape pods. They're tracking my biosignature, Thalia said quietly. Just as they did on the ship. Jeremy checked the pod systems. We have minimal shields and no weapons. And an injured crew member, Larson added, glancing at Vex's still form. The Draconian vessel grew larger in their viewport, predatory and implacable. A tractor beam lanced out, catching their pod in its grip. They're pulling us in, Nareen confirmed unnecessarily. Thalia's expression hardened into something dangerous. They want me for their biological weapons program, to finish what they started on my homeworld. We won't let that happen, Jeremy promised, his blue eyes fierce in the dim light. The pod shuddered as the tractor beam strengthened. Alarms blared, warning of imminent capture. There's another pod, Larson said suddenly, pointing to a small blip on their sensor display. It's Commander Trell and some of the bridge crew. They're clear of the Draconian sensors. Can we contact them? Jeremy asked. Larson shook her head. Communications are being jammed. Thalia's violet eyes met Jeremy's, a plan forming between them without words. The phase shift technology, she said. We brought the core components. We could use it to disrupt the tractor beam, Jeremy agreed, following her thought process. It would require precise calibration, Prel cautioned, and it would drain our remaining power. If it fails, we'll be defenseless, Thalia finished. I know. Another violent jolt rocked the pod as the Draconian ship pulled them closer. Time was running out. Do it, Thalia ordered. The Rigelians worked with remarkable speed, connecting the salvage components to the pod's power systems. Larson assisted, her human adaptability complementing their technical expertise. Jeremy moved to Thalia's side, speaking low enough that only she could hear. If this works, we'll need somewhere to go. The pod won't sustain us for long. There's an Alliance outpost in the Vega system, she replied, but it's 3 days at maximum speed. Their eyes held, acknowledging the unspoken reality. 3 days in a cramped escape pod, with limited supplies and an injured crew member. We'll make it, Jeremy said with quiet confidence. Something softened in Thalia's expression. Your species' optimism is either your greatest strength or your most charming delusion. Maybe both, he replied with a small smile. The pod lurched again, now close enough to the draconian vessel that they could see individual details of its predatory hull. Phase shift ready, Prell announced. But we have only one attempt. Thalia took a deep breath, her commander's authority returning. Target their tractor beam emitter, on my mark. The group tensed, everything hanging on this moment. Now! A pulse of energy surged from their pod, momentarily distorting the space around them. The tractor beam flickered, then dissolved as the phase shift disrupted its coherence. It worked, Larson exclaimed. We're free. Full power to thrusters, Thalia ordered. Get us out of here. The pod lurched forward, accelerating away from the draconian vessel. Behind them, the indefatigable finally succumbed to its wounds, the reactor breach culminating in a blinding explosion that momentarily overwhelmed their viewports. The shockwave hit them seconds later, sending the pod tumbling through space. Emergency systems wailed as they were thrown against their restraints. When the chaos subsided, they found themselves adrift, the pod's systems severely damaged by the blast. Status report, Thalia demanded, wiping blood from a cut on her forehead. Life support functional but degraded, Naren reported. Propulsion at 20%. Communications offline. The draconian vessel, Jeremy asked. Larson checked the sensors. Damaged by the explosion, but still operational. They're regrouping. They'll come for us again, Thalia said grimly. They won't give up easily. Jeremy met her gaze across the dim pod, seeing both the commander and the woman he'd come to admire. Strong, determined, and now hunted for the very thing that made her unique. Then we'll have to be ready, he said, his voice steady with resolve. Together. In that moment, surrounded by danger and uncertainty, something passed between them, a promise, unspoken but binding. Whatever came next, they would face it as one. They're coming back around, Larson reported, her eyes fixed on the damaged sensor display. Estimated intercept in 20 minutes. The escape pod drifted through the debris field of the destroyed Indefatigable, its systems barely functioning after the shockwave. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but focused as the survivors assessed their dire situation. Options? Thalia asked, her commander's voice steady despite the circumstances. Prell's bioluminescence dimmed in what Jeremy had come to recognize as the Rigelian equivalent of a frown. Propulsion is insufficient for escape. Shields cannot withstand another attack. By all logical parameters, capture is inevitable. Logical parameters, Jeremy repeated thoughtfully. He moved to the center of the pod, drawing everyone's attention. That's exactly what the Draconians are counting on. Thalia studied him, violet eyes narrowing. You have an idea. It wasn't a question. In the short time they'd known each other, she'd come to recognize that particular expression, the one that meant his human mind was working in ways that defied conventional Alliance tactical thinking. Before I joined the Terran Space Force, I was part of a special operations unit, Jeremy explained. We specialized in asymmetric warfare, turning disadvantages into advantages. Human guerrilla tactics, Larson added with a knowing nod. Fighting when you're outgunned and outnumbered? Precisely, Jeremy confirmed. The Draconians expect us to run or surrender. They see this pod as helpless prey. What if we turn it into a predator instead? The Rigelians exchanged glances, their luminescence pulsing with skepticism. With what weapons? Naren asked. We have nothing? We have everything we need, Jeremy countered, gesturing around the pod. The phase shift components, the pod's power cells, even the medical supplies for Vex. Understanding dawned in Thalia's eyes. You want to create a trap. Not just any trap, Jeremy said, his blue eyes gleaming with determination. A uniquely human one. Over the next 15 minutes, the pod transformed into a battlefield. Under Jeremy's direction, they dismantled systems, repurposed components, and prepared for the Draconians' approach. The plan was audacious, relying on human ingenuity, Rigelian technical precision, and Solarian tactical knowledge. Draconian vessel approaching, Larson announced. They're powering up their tractor beam again. Thalia moved to Jeremy's side as they made final preparations. This plan of yours, she said quietly, the odds of success are better than the odds of surviving captivity, he finished for her. Especially for you. Their eyes met, volumes of unspoken emotion passing between them. In the days since he'd first boarded the Indefatigable, everything had changed. The cold, professional commander had revealed herself to be passionate, complex, vulnerable, and now hunted for the very thing that made her unique. Tractor beam engaging, Prell reported. The pod shuddered as the invisible force gripped it once more, pulling them inexorably toward the Draconian vessel. Everyone in position, Thalia ordered, her commander's authority undiminished by their circumstances. They took their places, Prell and Naren at the modified controls, Larson beside the injured Vex, Thalia and Jeremy at the airlock. The pod continued its controlled approach to the enemy ship, appearing helpless and defeated. They're scanning us, Larson reported. Focusing on your biosignature, Commander. Thalia's orange skin seemed to pale slightly, but her resolve never wavered. Let them look. It'll keep their attention where we want it. The pod jolted as it connected with the Draconian vessel's docking mechanism. Metal groaned against metal as pressure equalized between the two craft. Airlock sequence initiating, Naren announced. They're coming aboard. Jeremy and Thalia pressed themselves against the bulkhead beside the airlock, hidden from immediate view. In his hand, Jeremy held the makeshift weapon they'd constructed, a repurposed medical injector connected to the pod's fuel cells. Remember, he whispered to the others, timing is everything. The airlock hissed open. Two Draconian soldiers entered, their reptilian forms encased in armored exoskeletons, weapons raised. Their vertical pupils scanned the pod's interior, focusing immediately on the Rigelians and Larson. Where is the Solarian? One demanded, voice harsh and guttural. Before anyone could respond, Jeremy stepped from his hiding place and discharged the improvised weapon. A concentrated burst of energy struck the lead Draconian, overloading its armor systems. The soldier convulsed, then collapsed. The second Draconian swung its weapon toward Jeremy, but Thalia was already moving. With Solarian speed and precision, she struck the alien's arm, deflecting its aim. The energy blast hit the ceiling as Jeremy fired again, disabling the second soldier. Now, Jeremy shouted. Prell activated the modified phase shift device. Instead of disrupting the tractor beam, this time it targeted the Draconian ship systems directly. The effect was immediate. Alarms blared from the enemy vessel as its power fluctuated wildly. It's working, Larson confirmed, checking the sensor readings. Their shields are down, weapons offline. Naren, transmit the distress signal, Thalia ordered. The Rigelian complied, sending the emergency beacon they'd prepared. Not just a call for help, but a detailed report of the Draconians' illegal biological weapons program and their pursuit of Thalia as the last known Solarian. Signal away, Naren confirmed, but their communications are still active. They're calling for reinforcements. Jeremy moved to the airlock controls. Then we need to move fast. Everyone ready? At their nods, he sealed the pod's airlock and initiated emergency separation. The pod broke free from the Draconian vessel with a violent jolt, spinning away into space. Thrusters online, Prell reported. 25% power restored. Get us clear, Thalia ordered. Maximum distance. As they pulled away, Jeremy activated the final part of his plan. The modified components they'd left attached to the Draconian ship's hull detonated, not with enough force to destroy the vessel, but precisely targeted to disable its propulsion systems. Direct hit, Larson announced with satisfaction. They're dead in space. A cheer went up from the group. Even the Rigelians' bioluminescence pulsed with what Jeremy now recognized as their version of jubilation. Remarkable, Prell observed, studying Jeremy with newfound respect. Your species' capacity for improvisation is most impressive. It's what humans do best, Larson said proudly. We adapt. Thalia's violet eyes found Jeremy across the pod, filled with something that made his heart race. "You turned certain defeat into victory," she said softly, with nothing but scraps and determination. "Humanity's edge," he replied with a modest shrug. "When we're backed into a corner, we get creative." Hours later, as the pod continued its slow journey toward the Alliance outpost, Jeremy found Thalia alone in the small observation area. The others were resting, even Vex's condition had stabilized, thanks to Larson's medical skills. Thalia stood before the viewport, silver hair cascading down her back, orange skin luminous in the starlight. She turned as he approached, her professional mask completely gone. "The Alliance fleet has responded to our signal," she said. "They'll intercept us in 6 hours, and they've dispatched a strike force to capture the Draconian vessel." "With the evidence we transmitted, the Alliance can't ignore their biological weapons program anymore," Jeremy noted. "Your people will finally get justice." "Justice," she repeated softly. "I've pursued it for so long. I almost forgot what comes after." "After?" She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Life, Jeremy. A future." His breath caught as she reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with exquisite gentleness. "I never expected you," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "When they assigned a human liaison to my ship, I thought it was a political gesture, nothing more. I was determined to keep you at a distance." "That worked out well," he said with a small smile. She laughed softly, the sound like music. "You humans have a way of disrupting the most carefully laid plans, huh? It's another one of our talents." Her violet eyes searched his, suddenly serious. "When I brought you to that maintenance bay 2 weeks ago, I was curious about humans, about you specifically." "And now?" he asked, his heart pounding. "Now I'm certain," she replied, closing the distance between them. "Certain that what I feel for you goes beyond curiosity or attraction." Their lips met in a kiss that felt both familiar and thrillingly new. Unlike their first encounter, born of impulse and desire, this was deeper, a connection forged through crisis and triumph, trust and sacrifice. When they finally parted, Jeremy held her close, their foreheads touching. "What happens when we reach the Alliance outpost?" he asked. "You'll be assigned a new ship. I'll probably be reassigned too." A mischievous smile curved her lips, reminiscent of that first night in the maintenance bay. "Actually, as the highest-ranking officer to survive the indefatigable, I have certain privileges, including requesting specific personnel for my next command." "Are you offering me a job, Commander Nyx?" he teased. "I'm offering you a place by my side, Lieutenant Commander Mason," she corrected, "both on the bridge and off-duty." In the viewport behind them, the stars stretched into infinity, a universe of possibilities. The Draconian threat wasn't over. There would be other battles, other challenges. But in this moment, a human man and a Solarian woman had found something neither expected. A connection that transcended species and rank, forged in crisis and tempered by respect. "I accept," Jeremy said simply, pulling her close once more. As their lips met again, he reflected on how wrong his initial expectations had been. He had anticipated coldness from the alien commander, had prepared himself for professional distance, and possibly even prejudice. Instead, he had found passion, courage, and ultimately love, proving once again that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or tactics, but the ability to connect, to understand, and to transform even the most unlikely encounters into something extraordinary.